My name is Jeff Grunfeld, and as chairman of the Student Speakers Program, I want to welcome you here today. There will be a public reception afterwards in the men's lounge at 1. It's open to everybody from about 1 to 2. There will be coffee on hand, and you can have a chance to meet with Cesar Chavez personally. Before our guest came on the farm labor scene, it was thought impossible to organize a union of farm workers in this country. But 10 years ago, he founded a movement of poor people that has grown into the first successful farm workers union in United States history. Against seemingly insurmountable odds, he led a successful 5-year struggle in the grape fields. In the summer of 1970, 10,000 farm workers walked out of the Salinas lettuce fields under the Black Eagle banners of his United Farm Workers. Many consider him one of the great nonviolent leaders in the world today. We are proud to have with us the leader of the farm workers movement for dignity and justice in the fields, a man the late Robert Kennedy called one of the heroic figures of our time, Cesar Chavez.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias. Muchísimas gracias. Muchísimas gracias, compañero Jeff Grunfeld, compañeras y compañeros estudiantiles de la Universidad de California en Los Ángeles. Es un placer para mí estar con ustedes hoy este día. Brothers and sisters, it's a pleasure for me to be here with you this afternoon to talk to you about some of the problems that we're confronted with, to bring you a message from the farm workers, and to ask you to support us. I want to acknowledge our brothers and sisters in back of me. I know that you're there. I can't turn back because of the mic. I also want to acknowledge that brother Michael Shapiro is here. As you know, he's running for Congress in this district. You know him. And also acknowledge our sister Thelma Jackson of the ESME local here at UCLA, local 2070. I understand that there's some brothers and sisters from Loyola University at the rally today, and also some brothers and sisters from Santa Monica City College. Chicanos, chicanas. I want to recommend to you and tell you, in case you should not know, that the grape boycott is over, and that grapes are really very healthy and very good for you, and that if you eat grapes, you'll create more jobs for us, and that we need. But also, I have to admit that the growers were right and we were wrong when they accused us that if they used to say a few years back, today grapes, what tomorrow? And they used to say that we'll boycott grapes today and tomorrow there'll be something else and after tomorrow something else. And so, not to disappoint them, we are boycotting lettuce, non-union lettuce. That it's the Western iceberg lettuce, the one that looks like lettuce. Looks like a cabbage. And it's really bad these days. So if you don't see the black eagle, don't take any chances. Don't eat it. Proposition 22 has only one reason for being. You see, when the strike started in Delano back in 1965, the employers were very sure that that strike would be broken, as so many strikes have been broken in the last 70 or 80, 90 years. And they were right. They were right. Had it not been for the boycott, we'd still be struggling to get the union built. When we left the fields to go on the boycott, the employers also went following us. And we went to the people of this country and we said, in whichever way we could, with leaflets, going to meetings, to students, to union meetings, to church meetings, and everywhere and anywhere that we have us, that they would have us, and we told the people in America, help us, we need your help. And they responded. And the employers came right after us. But they went to the public in a little different way. They went through slick political or slick paid advertisement, and we beat them. And after they found out that we could actually get people to boycott in this country, and the only thing left for them to do was to come up with Proposition 22 that would essentially strip all those rights away from us and your rights to help us if it should be enacted. They took Proposition 22 right after we won the strike in Delano in July of 1970 and went to the halls of Congress in Washington and tried to peddle that piece of legislation, and only one old tired senator took it on. Only one old tired senator accepted and became sort of their champion. And of course he was retired in fact he was retired I think that same year. He used to be your senator. And when they found that this piece of legislation was laughed at and was rejected soundly in the halls of Congress, then the American Farm Bureau, a collection of some extreme right-wing groups, which to this day we don't understand. We just don't understand why we are on the number one list in their bad list of people in this country. But anyway, and the National Right to Work Committee and assorted groups made a promise that they would go to every state in the country to have 22 enacted to the state legislatures. And they've been to 37 states, and we've defeated them in every state except 3. Kansas has Proposition 22 enacted as a law. So does Idaho, and so does Arizona. All 3, incidentally, are right-to-work states. And so in Arizona, we made up our minds that we're going to fight back the best way we could. And we told the governor in Arizona, Governor Williams, if you sign that piece of biased, unconstitutional, repressive legislation, we're going to fight you back. And we're going to do it in such a way you're not going to like it very well. We're going to recall you. And he laughed, and the 2 major newspapers in Arizona wrote articles making fun of the farm workers. And we started the work in early June of this year. We needed 103,000 signatures to recall him. We now have 112,000 signatures. When we went to Maricopa County, where Phoenix is situated, we talked to the black brothers and the Chicanos and the Indians and the white brothers who wanted to work with us, and we said, we'd like to do something to get our program going. Can you help? And the suggestion that they made was that we register voters, and we did. Together with them, when we came into Phoenix, there were 13,000 more Republicans than Democrats. Right now, there are about 60,000 more Democrats than Republicans. And most of those are the Chicanos and the blacks and the Indians in that area. And we went to every Indian reservation. We made a 1-month trip in Arizona visiting the Indian reservations, the farm workers, all of the cities, all of the colleges, all the universities, everywhere and anywhere they would have us. But we went to Flagstaff right after July 4th and found out that there was a 3-day fiesta, powwow they call it, where thousands and thousands of tourists come to see the Indians dance. And in this particular fiesta or powwow, some of the young Indians from the American Indian movement got up, took the mic away from the speaker, and told the Indian brothers and sisters, do not denigrate your religion, do not dance. And they were arrested. There were 7 of them. They were charged with crossing a state line to incite to riot. We went to the judge. The local judge was a Chicano, or at least I think he just has a Chicano name. I'm sure he's not a Chicano. And I said, man, this is so ridiculous. How can you arrest those 7 men? Because they took a mic away from the speaker. I'm sure it could never be a felony, and it would be very difficult to construe taking a microphone away from someone as a misdemeanor. The most we could agree on would probably be some inconvenience. But nevertheless, he was arrested. So we spoke to a rally of people out at the outskirts of town because no one would rent us a hall, and we just told the judge and the city fathers that if these guys were not released, or if those charges were not dropped, we were going to bring our friends from all over the country. And they believed it. And a few hours later, the charges were dropped to misdemeanor, and they were out on $50 fine. And then we found out that they had arrested 667 Indians on the 3-day powwow. And when we complained, the judge told us that it was really not that bad because last year they had arrested 878. And we found out that they keep them in jail for 3 days, and they use them as free slave labor to clean up all of the stuff all of the streets after the powwow, and then they release them without bail. That's Arizona politics for you. We went to the Navajo Indian Reservation, the largest reservation in the country, and we found out that 2,700 Navajos had registered to vote in 1970, the largest number ever in that reservation. We found out that some of those families had to travel 130 miles to a polling place. Today there are over 35,000 registered to vote, and they ain't going to travel 130 miles to go to a polling place. I can assure you that. And so there'll be a recall election, not on November the 7th. The governor called us about a week and a half ago and suggested that to have the recall election, since we already have the signatures, on November the 7th, because in this way it would save the state $500,000. And we considered his proposal for 15 minutes and calling back. We told him we too were interested in saving money, and suggested if he really wanted to save money for the state, why not resign? Proposition 22 seeks to do only one thing. They want to take the strike and the boycott away from the Farm Workers Union as a way to stop our progress and to eventually destroy the union. The employers want nothing. The growers want nothing more than that. The way that they've got Proposition 22 written says that there should be no strikes at harvest time for 60 days. There should be a 60-day injunction given to an employer on ex parte basis. If he goes, he gets the injunction, and we don't even have to be present to defend our interest for 60 days. And one wonders, why not 43 days or 44 days or 39 days or 10 days instead of 60 days? Of 192 crops that are grown in California, 98% of those crops, major or minor crops, are harvested within 45 days. So you see now why 60 days. If a group of workers in Coachella Valley, grape workers, were to want to strike in Coachella Valley, they could be enjoined for 60 days, 2 months. The same workers would move over to Bakersfield, Arvin, Lamont area. The same workers, different employers. They wanted to strike there to build a union, to be enjoined for another 2 months. This is 4 months now. the same workers, which is the same workforce, goes to Delano, they can be enjoined for another 60 days, another 2 months, that's now 6 months. And the same group of workers can go to Fresno, be enjoined for another 2 months. If they go to olives and to oranges, that's it, that's a whole year. So in fact, Proposition 22 seeks to destroy the union by outlawing the strike, the right of workers to strike forever. There's no set of workers in the country that are being penalized this way. No set of workers. And we're not complaining. We're happy and grateful that other workers still have the right to strike, but they're trying to take it away from us. Then they move over to the other thing that they want. They want to do away with the boycott. They want to do away with the boycott because we have demonstrated to them that we can go out to the masses of people in this country, and that the majority of the people in this country do care about the underdog, do care about injustices, and have demonstrated in a very direct way that they want to help us. Not only the people in this country, but people throughout the world. In the great boycott, we experienced some of the greatest acts of charity towards the farm workers. A friend of mine traveling through Hong Kong came back to Delano all excited at the end of 1969 to tell me that he'd been in Hong Kong and he had gone to a small fruit stand, and right in front of that very small fruit stand was a Chinese man with a picket sign. And on one side of the picket sign there were some characters. My friend doesn't know Chinese. He thought they were Chinese characters. But on the other side of that sign, were in plain old English, the following message: do not eat California grapes. Or the case in London, a member of the Transport Workers Union, his family and his 2 teenage daughters picketing in front of a store. One of the vice presidents who had been there to attend a congress of the World Council of Churches came upon them. He was going to go into the store. He was stopped, and they explained to him all about the boycott and why he shouldn't eat grapes, why he shouldn't go into that store, and the whole background of the strike. Can you imagine that? Or perhaps the best story yet is a little girl in Washington, D.C. that I tell so often because it points to us that people do want to help. Back in the beginning of the boycott, this particular family in Washington, D.C., a young couple, was very together with the strike and the boycott, and so in that household there was all the talk about boycott grapes, do not eat grapes, help the farm workers, the Welga, and so forth. And soon after the little girl was born, 4.5 years later, the mother was at a supermarket in Washington, D.C., doing her shopping. She was going through the aisle with a little girl with her, and they came upon a display of grapes, and the mother was, of course, ignoring the grapes going by, but the little girl stopped and pulled her dress and asked her, "Mommy, when are you going to buy me some boycotts?" And so Proposition 22 wants to prevent that little girl and our brother Chinese in Hong Kong and the people in London and people throughout this country the right to help us have a union. Because Proposition 22 states clearly and specifically that there shall be no boycotts of any sort, including no boycotts by trade name. And they go to the ridiculous, just to make very, very sure that nobody misses the point, there shall be no boycotts by generic name. And so it would be illegal to ask you to boycott lettuce if Proposition 22 should pass. And so, not to take any chances, I'm asking you right now, before, God forbid, it becomes law, vote no on 22 and don't eat lettuce. Boycott lettuce, and boycott lettuce. Then the employers come back, then the growers come back, and they have one problem. They've been saying that our union does not represent the workers' interest, that the workers do not want the union, and that we're afraid of elections. And that could be nothing, that could be probably the biggest falsehood that they've ever perpetrated, because you see, most unions today in the United States organize through elections and not through strikes and boycotts. And do you think we want to be tied up in a strike and a boycott for 5 years where we can decide the whole issue in maybe an election in 30 days? We too want elections, but we don't want elections under their own rules. Proposition 22 is sugar-coated. In order to take the strike and the boycott away from us, the growers are telling the public, yeah, but it's going to give the workers a right to a free election. And we say nonsense. This is how free the elections are. First of all, a farm worker cannot be considered a farm worker with rights to vote unless he has worked 100 days in any one geographic area the previous year. And that would eliminate a whole bunch of workers. But that's not all. Also states that a worker cannot vote more than once in any 12-month period. So consider this problem. A group of workers working in grapes for some great miracle. I know we'll never get to an election under 22, but supposing we did, for the sake of explaining it to you, supposing that there was election in grapes for farm workers in the summer, the same group of workers move over to olives in the fall. Different crop, different employers, but the same workers. Those workers could not vote to have an election in a union in olives because they voted in the summer in grapes. And if the same workers, as is the case, should move over then to citrus in the winter, they could, a different crop, different employers, they still couldn't vote on Proposition 22 because they voted in the summer in grapes. And if the same workers, as is the case, will go to field crops, will go to row crops, beans and peas and so forth in the spring of the following year, and they wanted to have a union with different employers, different crops, they couldn't vote. It would be against the law under 22 to vote because they voted the previous summer for grapes. And just to make sure that all bases are covered, doubly covered, then they come with probably the most ridiculous qualification for voting. States that there shall be no elections at any time when the amount of migratory and seasonal workers outnumber the permanent workers in any ranch. 5% of the workforce in California is permanent. 95% is either migratory because it migrates inter or intrastate, and the other part of it is seasonal workers that live there, don't move, but they do not work as steady year-round workers. And that's the kind of election procedures that the employers want to give us, but that's only sugarcoating because they really don't want to give us a right to elections, the right to have a free election in a union. What they want is to take the strike and the boycott away from us and then sugarcoat it and try to fool the public that in fact they're giving us a free election when in fact they're not. And so, brothers and sisters, if there should be a great two miracles in one season and we got through all of those rigged elections, and I'm sure we wouldn't, but just for the sake of explaining, and we made it to the negotiating table, in big bold letters in Proposition 22 it states clearly that the union has no right to negotiate on pesticides. We are in the vanguard of the whole question of pesticides. Our union outlawed DDT before the British government did, and way before our own country did in our first contracts. And they're saying now that we don't have the right to protect our members, and we don't have the right to be concerned about you who eat the pesticides in those vegetables and in those fruits. Proposition 22 also states that we have no right to negotiate on anything except wages and working conditions directly related to the job, to the specific job that farm worker may be doing. As an example, if a group of workers are working at this field and a crop dusting plane is a few yards from them, and spraying, and the wind is going towards the farm workers, and the drift is harming the workers. We could not negotiate about that plane because that plane happens not to be piloted by a farm worker. It's the most vicious, atrocious piece of anti-labor legislation that has been introduced in the history of California. It's also the beginning of a right-to-work law. But supposing that it would pass, now they also have provisions to do away, to met out sentences if you break the law. If I break the law as a union leader, or the workers, or you as supporters, you're subject to 1 year in jail and up to $5,000 fine. But if the employers break the law, if the growers break the law, the only thing that they're subject to is an unfair labor practice with no penalties attached to it. It's ridiculous. I don't see how in the world this piece of legislation could be passed. But they have reportedly $1.5 million that they're going to be dumping in this area about 2 weeks before the elections. See, we can't reach the people like they can. We've got to go to you, and we've got to depend for you to reach the people for us. Brothers and sisters, to conclude, I want to leave you with one thought. You know, you are really not that far from the farm workers. Every time, 3 times a day that you get around that table, you are partaking from their sacrifices, and you're partaking, whatever you eat with the exception of grapes, you're eating something that has gotten to your table with an awful lot of exploitation, a lot of suffering, a lot of traveling, a lot of injustice. And so we say that you're not really that far. And you know, the farm workers for generations, they travel from the black worker travels in large numbers from Florida and up the East Coast all the way to the Northeast. And they know before they leave that by the time they get back, they're going to be as broke as when they left. They know there's nothing in it for them. And the Chicano and the Filipino and the Puerto Rican and the Cuban and the other immigrants travel in the Southwest, and they know when they leave their homes that they're going to be just as broke when they get back, and they still go out and harvest those crops and plant them and cultivate them. You know why? I think they do it because they understand that they have a tremendous sense of mission. Although they get nothing for themselves, farm labor as it is today, who feeds all of you and all of us, the whole country and part of the world, they know that they've got a tremendous responsibility, whether they get anything for them or not, to feed you and to keep you well and alive. Isn't it tragic that the same men and women who harvest, who plant and cultivate and harvest the greatest abundance of food that the world has ever known, when it's all said and done and when the land is lay fallow to rest, and they look at themselves and they have no food for themselves. And this is really tragic. And so they're saying to you through me, as we feed you and fed you for generations, please help us feed ourselves. Please vote no on 22 so we can have a union. Thank you very much.
There is a microphone off to my left if you want to address questions to Cesar. And please sit down so that people in the back can see.
Cesar, I understand there's been problems of violence in Poplar. Can you please comment on it?
Yes, we're under a tremendous strain in Poplar, California, near Delano. We have a strike there with the Buttes Gas and Oil Company, which owns the White River Farms, ranch known before as the Shenley Farm, the first contract that we got. We've been harassed by the company agents and their friends and their relatives. Last Sunday, about 80 drunken men came and shot about 80 rounds of gunfire into the office, broke all the windows, came in and beat up 3 women working in the office. They destroyed the files and the desks, and we took us 2.5 hours to get the sheriffs to come there. When they came, they wouldn't arrest anyone. Right now, there are about 40 to 50 drunken men every single day, no further than a block from our office, trying to destroy us with threats of killing us, with threats of bombing the office, and shooting in almost daily. And we cannot get the sheriff in Kern County, Sheriff Wiley, or the district attorney of Tulare County in Visalia to make the arrest. They know who they are. We know who they are. We have their pictures. Our guys know who the attackers were, and the sheriff and the district attorney refuse to bring charges. We're asking all of our friends here who would like to do it, please call the district attorney in Visalia, California, Tulare County, and get on him. Tell him you'd like to see those men arrested before they kill someone. It's really important to get that help from you.
Can you make a comment on who you support for president and what the presidential views on Proposition 22 are?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part.
And what the candidates think about Proposition 22.
I think I know what the question is, what the answer is. The farm workers are a very practical politics because the Nixon administration is really on us, and they've tried this last year, 3 bold attempts to destroy us. We've got to go and get friends to help us. And so we're voting for, the workers voted by referendum to support Senator McGovern. He in turn is supporting the proposition. He's made the only local issue in the whole country that's taken on is Proposition 22. There's no other local in the country that he's speaking to except 22. And so it's a case of, give and receive. But I understand that the McGovern forces need volunteers to go get the vote out and do some work. I don't know where they report, but I was told to make the announcement. Where would they report? Who asked me to make the announcement?
There are people in the crowd with clipboards.
With clipboards. See your friends with clipboards. They're the McGovern people.
Cesar, I'd like to know what we as individual citizens can do who signed Proposition 22 under fraudulent terms when it was passed as a petition.
I think that one of the things you should do is you should sue the hell out of them. And if you need an attorney, we'll provide an attorney. We don't want the money that you're going to get from because they're very rich and they have a lot of money, but we do want to have the people sue to prevent these shysters, these slick public relations firms of committing all kinds of frauds. To Proposition 22 is so full of fraud that it's I was going to say something else. That, it's ridiculous. The judge in Sacramento, the state attorney, rather the Secretary of State, Brown, went before the judge, the Superior Court judge in Sacramento, with over 6,000 affidavits of fraud, misrepresentations, and all kinds of technicalities that they used to qualify 22, and the judge said that he could not rule on it now because if he did, this would be harming and would be irreparable harm done to the proponents of 22. Isn't that cute?
Sir, how can you justify the formation of a union under your conditions when there are many people and probably more people working in the fields who have no desire to unionize and who do not support your strike?
Yeah, that's really, the people who carry that line is really, a group of people who are dreaming. Let me tell you, I just came back from a week-and-a-half tour in the large agricultural areas in the state. In Delano, we had 10,000 people to a rally on a Saturday night. In Stockton, we had 2,000 people. In Fresno, we had 5,000 people. In Salinas, we had 10,000 workers. 10,000 workers in Delano and Salinas, the whole workforce. So we do represent them. They do want the union because, you see, a union to them means better wages and better working conditions and treatment as human beings. And they want the union. This is their only union. It's the only true union. Because, see, we are experts in farm labor. We came from the ranks, and we do not drive trucks.
What are the reasons do you feel behind the court's refusal to check into the legality of Proposition 22 until after the election?
Supposedly because the courts for years now do not want to rule on anything where the people are going to be ruling. And so what they're saying is we don't want to make a ruling on 22 until the people vote. And it may happen, what I hope not, but it may happen what happened in 1970 with Proposition 14, the real estate proposal, where the courts refused repeatedly to rule on it. The people voted for it, and then the courts ruled it was unconstitutional and threw it out.
Okay, Cesar, I have a simple question. I like to, in behalf of the mothers and the people from the projects in Los Angeles, I'd like to invite you to come and talk to the people there. I think that, you know, it's nice that you speak to the students, but it's also good that you speak to the people that you are fighting for, and they've been willing and they're yearning to listen to what you have to say.
It's a beautiful invitation. I accept it, brother, right now.
When can you do it?
Talk to my people with a schedule. We'd have to break the schedule, but we'd gladly break it. Voy a hablar con nuestra gente.
Cesar, I wanted to ask a very practical question. You know, the lettuce heads, the western lettuce heads that have the heads that have the red eagle, are they cool or are they, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's red and sometimes it's black, but if it's the farm worker eagle, it's okay. It's
okay.
A-okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very few people sell it. But when you go to a restaurant, to a store, if you don't see the eagle, just say, no, nothing doing, don't buy it. And make an argument. You have to educate the store owners, and, you know, but we need your help, just like the grapes. And when we get through with grapes, it'll be something else, maybe, who knows. Yes.
In a situation in which Proposition 22 is merely the opening shot in the drive for our national right to work law, in a situation in which the Democrats and the Republicans support fully the existence of wage controls, the drive for productivity and layoffs, which is currently exploding in the automobile and steel plants, where do you stand upon the necessity for the immediate convening of a Congress of labor, of organized labor, to construct a labor party pledged to the interests of labor and fighting for a program of full employment, of nationalization of all industry, of providing conditions, decent conditions of life for every worker? Where do you stand?
It'd be great, but it would be, if you convene that kind of a meeting, you'll probably have 3 people there. I'd probably be one of them. At this point, it's difficult for the labor movement to do it. But I think that after this election, a lot of things are going to be settled, I hope.
Don't forget there's a reception at the men's lounge starting at 1. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Mire, hable con los muchachos que vienen conmigo. Hello.
And they can interview